We are going live now. Give it a few seconds. All right, I am here with Cyberfam, who I've been watching a lot of his videos recently. So great to have him here as a guest. I am personally fresh off my interview with Dave Lee, which I got some messages on Reddit how it was an absolute train wreck, but I got a lot of good feedback as well. Dave is a great interviewer, so I think we're going to kind of just break some of that down today in this interview, but would just love to have some of your industry insights here and excited to get started. So welcome. Introduce yourself however you want.
Yeah, thanks, Jackson. I'm super excited to be here. I think I mentioned to you before, like I've been watching your stuff for a pretty long time. I didn't catch the Dave one, but happy to chime in on whatever. But at the end of the day, it's good to have varying points and different kinds of views on certain stuff, and we're all kind of in this together. So that's my take on that. But yeah, my name is Shabari. I work in the industry. I'm right now sort of like a everything engineer, but traditionally I was trained as a DevOps and a reliability engineer. Right now I'm doing a lot of infrastructure where I'll be provisioning servers and that kind of stuff, whatever the infrastructure and organization needs to move towards a certain initiative. And as a part of this, I'm actually a consultant for the past 3-4 years now, and part of that you wear multiple hats, and one of those hats was actually onboarding lots of software. And that's where a lot of my insights come from, really. So as I onboard software, it's a mix of managed services, SaaS products, and that kind of stuff. But as you're onboarding software, you need to have like a certain level of engineering there, because most of the time you have to do a lot of work out, like after you onboard and after you do all that stuff. So
Yeah.
that's where half the insight for the channel and stuff comes from. So really going at it from like a code technical side of it, and then you can address it from a stock technical side.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So just to get this going here on Palantir stuff, I saw one of your videos where I think we were sort of thinking along the same lines, because this is what Palantir management has said, which is they don't have any direct competition. Their competition is their clients,
Yeah.
customers on the commercial side choosing to build their own solutions. But then I saw you kind of change your tune in a different video. So I'm just wondering where you started on the competition thesis and where you stand today with that competition, and sort of where you see Palantir in the industry in a scope there.
Yeah, that's a good question. So technically the tune wasn't fully changed. I just added a thesis to it. So in the
Okay.
beginning, the real truth is Foundry, Gotham, and all these things, just if you just look at them from a product platform perspective, they are on in a class of their own, right? And I've said this, and I'm still going to say this. The thing is, a lot of SaaS as it stands right now, and this is a huge money making industry in the way it's done, okay? But as you pitch, and like for example, if you're a company that needs a product, they'll give you a piecemeal version of what you need. So it's a very like a leashy situation where you sit in a room, you say, okay, what do you need? You need a CRM product. Okay, we have a very narrow CRM product that does exactly what you need. But if you need to do any other stuff on top of that, you got to go through a professional services, all this other stuff. So all these other companies, they're not used to the way that the Palantir gives you the whole thing, right? They give you like an entire agnostic product, and they're like, okay, everything is here. If you need anything past this, sure, we can take it on and do all sorts of consulting and all sorts of whatever other stuff. But that's not how the industry works. So in that sense, they don't have competition. Like they already have their product maturity is very high. It's to integrate all these different narrow products into one platform is not easy. Like even though they have these different things in other organizations, there's versioning, there's different code bases, there's all this other stuff is there, and you can't just smash it into one, right? Especially bigger organizations, they have teams that write in different code bases, different versions, different open source software. There's so much that goes into it. The entire deploy process is completely different too. So when you incorporate that, the point I was trying to make is some of these companies like Microsoft, Salesforce, they have parts of what Foundry and parts of what Gotham, the feature set, they have it, but it's its own product there. Whereas Foundry and Gotham, they're saying we're giving you this whole thing. It's solely meant on making your analysts and making your people who actually take the actions more efficient. Whereas the other companies are saying we have a narrow product that fits your business case. What you do with it is up to you. So from a high level perspective, it is completely in a class of its own. But from a like feature set perspective, there are competitors for sure. So that's why I was trying to address in that last video, where I was saying like,
Yeah.
it really depends on what these companies are going to do, right? Like I truly think and I was talking to Chris Patel on this the other day, but I truly think that if Palantir was able to somehow partner with Microsoft in some degree, and we already see that with like Wejo, Microsoft is like an investor there too as well, right? But they're not a direct partner, but they're sort of in that same sort of category. But if somehow in the future, if they are, then that would be like they would be unstoppable. Because in my opinion, these guys like Microsoft, they're very heavy competitors, and they're they have an army of amazing engineers. Actually, to take it back from the tech side of it, there's like a running theme. People always like kind of crap on Microsoft a little bit just because they're kind of like the grandpa of the industry, right? They've been around or whatever. But these guys they're not stupid. Like even Oracle, like they're not stupid. They know the core engineering people that have been with them for like ages, that have trained up people to sort of take their space. They don't leave, right? They know their business. They know where their money comes from, but they're also, in my opinion, I think they're okay taking second place, but they have the firepower to just absolutely just scorched earth everyone else. So like if they let Palantir through, they're going to just turn their sights on like SAP and they're just going to wipe them off. So like the engineering talent in we're still talking big tech here, right? So it's like they won't sleep on you. And right now I think SaaS, because of where it's sitting, it's a little stagnant. Like they're able to generate so much money from the way the business model works right now that they don't need to worry about something like Palantir until now. Right. So that's where I was trying to go at that.
Yeah. So what would you say to, and this is where I kind of stumbled a bit on the Dave Lee part, which, I mean, of course, this is a very common point of contention, and that is the fact that Palantir is not a consultancy. But there's always this question about that. Now, I know Palantir's not a consultancy, but I like the way that Dave sort of asked the question. And what I was trying to say, and it didn't come across well because, I mean, you only get one shot at answering a question like this because Dave kind of carried the interview forward. He's really good at that. But what I was trying to say is, because his point of view was that Palantir actually has to send out an engineer to get it set up. So what I was trying to explain, and my answer to the question, the way he had asked it, is that yes, that's true. But as they grow, like they have to do the specific installation with the sort of acquire part of the phase of the expansion throughout the organization. Right. And once they sort of tinker with it and get it specifically, like whatever modules they have to put in specifically for the business, then I feel like, sure, you can consider that someone consulting, even though it isn't. So like I give that part of the sort of conversation. I'm fine with that being argued. What I don't agree with is everything after that point, because I feel like everything after that point is the software getting scaled throughout all departments in the organization and going to everyone that doesn't even have software experience with the low code, no code environment, where they can actually start generating alpha as individuals for the organization. So that was kind of what I was trying to get at with the question of, is Palantir a consultancy? Because personally, I don't even understand why people bring that up. What's your kind of read on the consultancy?
So, I mean, I am a consultant. I've worked for 3 consultancies so far. I can't speak for all consultancies, right? But let me address the exact point you're talking about. If you're using that exact yardstick, then Google's a consultancy, right? Then I don't know, Oracle especially is a consultancy if you're using that exact same measure, like the measuring stick. Okay, seriously, right? Because I was just trying to tell you, the space is like that. That's how it is right now. So for me, in the places that I've worked at, they have other software, like they use sort of white labeled managed services software to actually pitch to their clients. Yeah, that's true. But there's almost a sense that we're not going to do it all because we are consultancy. Like we'll just sort of like do a little bit and then we'll pay, we'll charge you hourly to then fix it. It's like it's like a mechanic, right? Like you don't want to take your car to a mechanic, to that one guy, because like he'll find 6 other problems and then he'll charge you for it. Right. So it's kind of like that. So no, it's not a consultancy. If you're are they consulting? Yeah, obviously. I mean, like, it's software. You trying to explain your software to somebody itself, by definition, is consulting. So yeah, sure. If you're using that yardstick, I will invest in this consultancy until the cows come home. But at the end of the day, the whole forward deployed engineer thing, I don't think is a bad thing. Actually, I think that's a positive thing. Why would that not be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
You got to understand, like, these guys do specific, like, I touched on this from the AI angle too. Like, the things that they have to do, right? Even if you can deploy over the air or whatever the case is, you'll need someone there in case something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong. And that's the thing I was trying to address in one of my other videos, which was the onboarding time is really fast for Palantir. Like, they're claiming that they can do stuff in a matter of weeks, even if
Yeah.
it is, let's say, 6 weeks. Like, I've onboarded really crappy, like, managed services products, which anybody can onboard with the USB stick, and it's taken like an entire quarter with the team of like 6 people.
Wow.
Right. So just from that, I think, to be honest, it's just quality control. The way, the basic way I see it is just quality control. But
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
which is really important when you have these multi-million-dollar contracts. Working with these ginormous enterprises, like, that is the number one concern. You're not hiring Palantir to just start out on your own with this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that is valid.
And the thing is, they're also writing software for, like, for example, if we're talking edge AI and all this stuff, right? Like edge, edge AIP, I think it is, right? They're putting software on devices that are, again, on the edge, that are supposed to be running by themselves in their own sort of. That's actually, that's not just software. That's a hardware problem. That's an efficiency issue. All this other stuff comes into play here. So you almost need to have certain people that come out and a little bit of all these troubleshooting in the beginning. And actually, this point is not that, uncommon. So whenever you get software for example, if you're I don't know, if you're onboarding any kind of software, you're almost always going to have some engineer come in and sort of just sit there, right? Most of the time they don't do much, because it's usually the sales folks that close it. But I haven't been in a meeting where there is not a set of engineers there. So I mean, sure.
Yeah. So kind of moving on to the Foundry for Builders, which is supposed to be this next generation for smaller companies that does not require a forward deployed engineer, hypothetically, once they probably get past this alumni program, iron out all the kinks. So do you see that as sort of a natural progression and something that is obviously technically feasible, as they've already developed these modules, this software? It's probably less of a full stack, but that kind of is the answer to this question, right?
I think, to be honest, it's actually not that different from just a main Foundry platform. Because it's got to have some level of shareable, like, code sharing and all this stuff. Maybe the modules within the actual product are probably a little bit different. The thing is, I think the play with Foundry for Builders is kind of like a two-pronged thing. Part of it is just because the way I see Palantir, and I think I mentioned this in one of the tweets, but I think it's more of like a Rosetta Stone for like big data, right? They're not trying to tell you what to do with your stuff.
Yeah.
SaaS companies right now, and products that are there, CRM, any kind of ERP products, they're literally like, okay, we can solve your problem, but you got to do it this way, right? Or you have to like do these things and move your data like this. And there's a lot of massaging and I'm not saying there isn't with Palantir. The most likely is. It's not 100% like that's easy, right? But the way that they're doing it, it's very agnostic, and they're looking at it from an action perspective. Very few companies focus on that. They focus more on what problems they can address. But people don't understand that when they're talking about problems, that's current. Like, if me and you have a company, we know the current problems that we have, but we can't see the things that are coming up further down, unless we're like super smart people. Maybe we are. But, so like Palantir does this thing where it's like, dude, we'll give you something. It's a little agnostic. Yeah, it does things a certain quirky way, but at the end of the day, you're able to see the entire process down to the end, and there's no there's no roadblocks along the way from your data all the way to your action, right? That's the way I'm looking at it. Now, for the Foundry for builders, I think the angle is they're trying to get as much like different categories and types of data sets as possible is I think where they're playing with that. That's the first approach that I'm thinking. So you can work with, they work with governments, they work with banks and all this other stuff, right? But at a certain point, when you hit the enterprise, the data is very similar. Like they're all staged very similar. They all look the same. They all kind of feel the same. They have similar kinds of engineers and that kind of stuff, right? But when you get towards startups, they do some really, really crazy stuff with their data. Their schema looks different. All the stuff different, like all the different things happen. And I think they're trying to maybe address future feature sets from investing in, or giving Foundry out to builders, like, for example. That's one. The second thing, actually, I mean, we could probably, touch on this later on, but I think they're kind of fishing for. I mean, I don't know. This is my take on it. I've had experience in like this kind of situation, so that's why I think this. But I think they're fishing for like an acquisition,
Mhm.
and I think they're fishing for an acquisition that might look more towards the consumer side, right? I mean, like we
Really?
were talking about before, I don't think they're going to build a Snapchat, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think they're looking to expand their categories and their types of businesses that they cater to. Because any kind of offering SaaS company, if you just stay with banks or if you just stay with a type of business, you're dead in the water, right? So
Yeah.
you got to expand that.
So when you say acquisition, sort of what kind of size of a company would you like? What are you expecting? Like if Palantir announces an
Yeah,
acquisition tomorrow, this is not like they can't afford a big company.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so if you were kind of saying this is what I have to guess for an acquisition, kind of
yeah.
what would it be?
Um, I don't know. I don't know what kind of company or like the market cap or anything, but I would think it's something to do with because you can try and catch these companies a little bit before they take off just by looking at the kind of tech and how they're working. Now,
Mhm.
it's easy to say you can just like look at the code and you know what's happening. It's not always the case. Like just in the industry, not everyone does everything the right way. But if you have a company that the leadership's good, the direction's good, they have like a few sticky clients, that kind of stuff, right? You can pick these out. Like I have an example here. So I used to work for this IoT company, and they used to pull telematics data from trucks and all this stuff, right? They would basically beam up to the satellites, come down at a certain time frame, and then you would sort of track the progress and stuff, right? The problem is they wanted to get into like a different angle. They didn't just want to stay with big logistics. They want to go into like smaller, delivery drivers and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But the product they built, which was like an app, it was like terrible, right? It was really bad. And the issue was after this, they were like, okay, we got to go and shop around to see what's happening. So they sent us actually to like talk to this one company that did exactly what they did, but through an app. So it wasn't through hard devices; it was through like GPS, tracking from your app and from your phone and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And logging for like truck drivers, because I think there was a mandate. It was like 5-6 years ago where before that the drivers weren't able to like they could log whatever, but then there were certain mandates after that where they have to put a certain amount of their logbooks after a certain amount of time, just to give you a
Okay.
gist, right?
Okay.
But these guys, they were like, yeah, go talk to them, just get pally with their engineers, that kind of stuff, right? So they kind of invested a little bit with these guys, and then just as soon as they started to really pick up their app downloads and all this other stuff, they went and acquired them like that, right?
Mhm.
So it's like I have that experience, and it's happened twice. I worked for another startup that did like data for grocery stores, not groceries, basically like they pulled in a lot big EDI files where I'll give you an example. Like say for example, you have a I don't know, like a chain of grocery stores across the country, and one in a certain part of the country I don't know, uses more toothpaste, for example, right? We would
Mhm.
write algorithms that say, okay, when you order this specific thing and not just org wide, right? So you're ordering very specific for each store instead of
Oh,
saying,
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it's almost like BI based on like local data more so. So in that place, the same story. Like there was a larger company, and this company is it's SPS Commerce. It's out in Minnesota, but they saw the stuff that these guys are doing, and like it was immediate. Like within a few months of me joining, they're like, "Yep, we're announcing an acquisition." So it happens all the time. I just don't know what kind of one they'll pick. I think it'll be something that is a little bit abstracted from the consumer side. Maybe like I floated like the whole like healthcare thing, but I'm just speculating
Mhm.
at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. I don't know. I mean, Palantir's obviously thinking way ahead on this if they've got
Yeah,
2 billion in cash and potentially if they had done this shelf offering that
yeah,
they have access to for the next 3 years. Apparently, they haven't even explained what that's going to be for. So they obviously have an ability to make an acquisition, but I think it is kind of just speculation at this point.
yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, I'm certainly they've acquired companies along the way, as you do.
Yeah,
So I think if the opportunity presents itself, and that's the other thing, right? In this market where growth companies have just been destroyed, like maybe there is an opportunity for, I mean, Palantir is among those that has
yeah,
been
yeah.
absolutely
It
wiped.
hurts.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, it
but
doesn't have to be a full-on acquisition. It could just be like a very hard partnership too, right?
Yeah.
Instead of memorandums of understanding and all this other stuff, it could be a very strong handshake, so to speak. So could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about Edge AI, which I haven't really looked too much into, but
Yeah.
I'm sort of starting to get it, where if you have these connected devices that,
Yeah.
or even, I think I heard Sankar in his recent interview on Bloomberg say that if you either don't want to or can't or don't have enough time to push to the cloud or whatever, or push to sort of the main foundry, is that when you would do this operating system on the device, or not operating system, but the actual
Yeah.
operating on the device itself, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you need really efficient software. So you got to deal with like power consumption, um, actual like power of the chips, right? Of the
It's understated.
compute
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like there are all these constraints. So I'm just wondering, this obviously isn't like a new idea,
Mhm.
but has it really been fully realized yet? Or is there some new, not necessarily a breakthrough, but is Palantir uniquely positioned to be able to do this? Kind of what's your read on that?
I don't know if they're unique in a sense. Just I think they are unique in the sense that, again, going back, like the whole thing about Palantir is they're focused on the actual action that comes from their software, really,
Yeah.
right? So Edge AI, I think, is that's the thing I'm looking for really for this company, because everyone has AI. Seriously, okay, like everyone and their grandma is doing some form of machine learning at their company, like like from chatbots all the way to complex financial, like piping through people's data, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of stuff that like that going around, but the thing is, the result of these never show up. Like, people always do the algorithms, and they have some sort of like scope as to what they want the algo to do, but then it
Mm,
never ends up doing anything other than just being something that you talk about in like hackathons or something. Seriously. As far as I've used it, I've used it for like contextualization and stuff, for like natural language processing. But again, even still, like
mm,
when you get to the end part of it, for an engineer, you can see it. You're like, oh wow, it does all of this, these things that we're set out to do. But then when you actually hand it off to the people that supposedly asked for it, they don't even know what they're asking for half the time. That's just, at least from my
okay.
experience, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
with Edge AI, they're like, you know what, screw it. We're gonna train some models in, probably, in their home base, which is the larger system. And once these models are trained, they're gonna sort of basically localize that into an edge and have it run by itself. And the cool thing about this is, like, for example, Tesla's working on like general purpose AI, right? Which is a very tough problem, because there's so many angles to approach that with, right? And so many places where you can poke holes and stuff. So it's a big problem. Whereas Palantir Edge AI is more like, yeah, we can do all these other things, but why don't we just focus on this one edge doing this one thing, right?
Okay.
But doing it in an autonomous fashion without too much, human intervention and all this other stuff. It's harder than it sounds, but it's not as hard as general purpose AI. And my take is, at least they're doing something, right?
With AI, or what? What do
With
you mean
with
by?
AI and machine
Okay.
learning, right?
Yeah.
Um, every hackathon I've gone through, it's always been like, oh my god, we do AI and machine learning, but then half the time it's a chat bot, and you're like, okay,
Okay.
enough already, right?
Yeah.
So
So it is. So it really does always sound as very much of a buzzword. But I
yeah,
I had thought that Palantir has, obviously machine learning and AI for like predictions based into their platforms already,
yep,
right?
yep,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So that,
Go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, Jackson.
Oh, I was
Okay,
just gonna. I'm sorry. I was gonna ask about the Tesla thing, not to get
yeah,
sidetracked on Tesla, but Tesla. I know Elon has said like this is the they're obviously going to almost solve for vision and all of
yeah,
this sort of general based stuff. But is this almost, because you had drawn the parallel? Is
yep.
this almost the same thing where Tesla is operating on the compute power, the power constraints of the battery, in the car? Is that sort of an example of an edge AI, because it's sort of the neural networks
I
of
mean,
a?
conceptually it is, but it's
Okay.
actually quite different, because the models that they would run on the car itself are like vastly bigger. Um,
Mm,
Edge AI from Palantir is, again, it'll run like maybe three or four functions that do very narrow specific things, and if it needs to go back into a feedback loop, it'll do that itself. So it's a sort of single or dual purpose, very simple, decision making process. that is autonomous. Now, the concept is, of course, with Tesla, they have to, conserve on battery life and all. That problem is still there. That is very, very much the same.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I think the whole edge AI stuff from Palantir might be a little bit harder, just because I think they're addressing it the same way, because it's freaking Tesla. Like, we already know what these guys, we already know how they innovate. But they're addressing it the same way. But the actual problem on the Palantir side will be a little bit tougher, just because they're operating on satellites, right? They're doing it on satellites. I think some of the armed forces stuff, like these things don't have network a lot of the times, where it's like very low bandwidth, and the actual compute in like a tank or something is not going to be a supercomputer, right? So just from that perspective, it's the problem itself is the container that edge AI is placed in is much smaller than a Tesla car.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you now, which this came up on the Dave Lee interview, was the B2C. So I think this is an interesting topic. I've talked about it. I feel like I'm just going to stop talking about it, because I've said what I've had to say about this, which is my opinion. Actually, let me bring it up so I can show you, because I know you hadn't seen so this was my deck that I made for Dave for this part on Dave's. I think I'm moving in the wrong direction here, but what I was saying, this is...
Man, Alex Karp's hair is like, I think you were saying something about people making fun of that or something, or people bringing that up. Just off a side, B2C, it would be kind of funny if they came up with some kind of if they did come up with something like a Snapchat, and like the only filter that they would have is just having Alex Karp's hair on your face or something. That'd be hilarious. I think I would get that.
It's funny because Ross Gerber, that was his reason. He gave a reason why he didn't like Palantir, and he said,
because of his hair,
Alex Karp looks evil. And I was like, all right, well,
holy shit, he looks
I guess
evil?
Yeah, I was kind of a little confused why that was his thesis for Palantir, but that's what it came out to.
I think maybe Ross Gerber just can't ski as well as Alex Karp. He's a little salty, Man,
yeah, that's got to be it.
That's got to be skiing. That's crazy.
It is. I'm just waiting for it to load, and then I'll show you the graphic I made, which was, I feel like, because David asked me, is there a master plan for Palantir? I said they haven't actually sort of published one, but here we go. So this graphic right here that I made, just triangle with an iceberg in the background, as sort of this is where I see us going with Palantir, which is B2G, the government product, first thing they were working on, how they got going as a business, down to B2B. And then when I was talking to Palantir management, I was like, so what's the deal with the consumer product? Do you have anything to say at this point? Yeah. And they said, actually, so like the ecosystem effects of Foundry almost create like a B2B to C sort of network, in which, and Sankar used the example of Skywise, where Skywise, so Airbus, but then to another company, which would be the airline itself. So he had said, there's this company that's called Peach Airlines. I forget, it may have been Japan or somewhere else. They only have 5 airlines. So like very much a small company, and that company is a client of Airbus, in which Foundry is like a product for them. So I put in there. So basically we have B2G, B2B, B2B2C, which is a real thing. I'm not just making that up as a term. And then, because I hadn't seen it.
They're all just made up, man.
It is, yeah, fair enough. But then B2C, so this is the part that's not confirmed. And I made it very clear. Dave was like, is there any evidence that this is going to happen? Yeah. And I said, not that I have heard. I'm pretty sure they've made no mention of this publicly. And that's always been the case. I've never tried to pretend like it's going to happen. I don't think anyone has. But Tom Nash is also big on the B2C idea. And it makes sense, right? Because if we go back to what I was talking about here, which is you have all of these sort of these first 5 elements coming together as I laid them out, which is the products that they've already built, the sort of thematic alignment with the sort of, obviously there's more and more data as you go, more need for that data to stay competitive, network effects that we just talked about, and the culture. So like, why are they trying to retain the top talent? And their mechanisms and frameworks they've already developed for growth. So basically I was saying, if you look out just a little farther, sure, this is not a sort of B2C company today,
Yeah.
but I think that's where Dave kind of said he doesn't agree with the prediction that Palantir will offer a B2C product, where he said basically like that would be like Oracle, or what was the other company? I forget what else he said, kind of reinventing themselves. So
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I actually don't. So I do agree with Dave that I don't think they're going to come out with a straight up B2C product, right? Unless it's that Instagram clone that can glue on Alex's hair on top of you or something on a filter. I'll buy that,
Yeah,
but outside of that, I don't think they'll do a B2C product. It's not. The thing is, like, where would they even do that, right? And see,
sure.
the reason, before we actually move on to that, and keep me on that, because I might forget, right? But the thing is, guys, like, the reason why I am so bullish on this company is not because of some potential B2C product that's coming in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
This is what I don't think people are understanding. And honestly, shout out to all the developers and stuff in my comments. Like, I see you guys, but they're completely reworking the way SaaS works, the way that the enterprise works. It is completely being reworked, right? So the potential, when you're saying I'm going to see some sort of gain from having a BDC product, I don't know, 5-6 years. I know Tom Nash said like 5 or 6 years from now, which is like, that's crazy, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't think that's the case. For a straight up B2C product is what I mean, right? Love the guy, love Tom, love you, Tom. Just I can't agree with you there, right? Or
Yeah,
you,
that would be way too soon.
yeah.
If like my original thoughts on this were probably 10 years or in that time
If
range.
anything, yeah. But the point is, you had a slide there with the whole network effect thing, right? That is, I think, in my opinion, the way Palantir is moving, the most understated thing, like, at least from a technical angle, that you can possibly think of.
Yeah.
Like, the thing people don't understand for the most part is the whole sales cycle and the whole conversion process of like enterprise SaaS and this kind of field is actually very closed. It's like, you have a problem, we have a solution, here you go, it's solved, right? Look at the thing, Athenia, right, with Merck. Look at what Skywise is, right? Look at the stuff that they're working with Hyundai for. They're making platforms where it's, you don't compete in the same way you used to anymore, right? Merck has people that they used to potentially compete with, that are sort of onboarding their, it's stage data. Honestly, it's not going to be their full data set. If it is, then that's just batshit, right? But like, it's going to be some form of abstracted data set, I'm sure. But even still, these guys used to have their own data sets, right? They used to have their own, appliances that had all their data. They did their own processing. They did their own massaging for their reason, and that's rightfully so. But what I think, like, one of my first like Twitter follows, Dima, he said this the best. They're providing like an ecosystem as a service. It's no longer SaaS. So they're saying more like, we're going to give you a playing field in which whoever's in the space can basically come and do whatever they're doing. Like, they've turned Airbus into a SaaS product, more or less, right? Like, they've turned Airbus and Skywise into their own product. So the network effect is ridiculous. It's almost like what's that example from, I guess, the California shovel thing, right? Where they're like, they gave you shovels, and instead of actually selling you like gold or whatever, that I don't know, but I think it's more of an ecosystem play. If you look at it from an ecosystem angle, you don't even need a B2C, because the entire current model of how SaaS works is absolutely smashed, right? You know what I mean? It's like, where everything is siloed, like, this person has their own walled garden, this person has their own walled garden. Now, if you don't and this is the if, right? This is the big if here. If this ecosystem is not, and I think that's why it's so agnostic, because they have to be. If they're not this agnostic and open, this will never work. But as this ecosystem comes in, if me and you were competitors, we could compete the same way we did, but using sort of like a model generated action from a platform that we're basically both playing in, right? It's almost
so you're saying so like, basically, if these two entities, which are competitors, have access to Foundry or using Foundry, then it comes down to who has the best data, right?
Yeah, because the model isn't going to give you a better better action to take than me, because our data sets are going to differ, right? They'll have some similarities, I'm sure, but the exact like microcosm of the decision that we make will differ. So if you if you have like, if you have like your own data set, your own products, I have my own, right? We already store them differently because we're competitors and we have different engineers and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, what happens is like we don't need to do that. Like the model will give me a different action than it will give you. So it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
biased,
Sure.
but it helps both of us. So it's like we went from 18th century boxing with like just bare knuckles, and now Palantir is giving us gloves, right? And they're just giving us playing fields to play on.
Yeah, so do you view Palantir as it stands today as a competitive advantage? Do you think that it truly is? Like, because this is the kind of pitch I was trying to make in this, that the alpha really is the essence of Palantir. It's the reason they're getting these big
Yeah.
commercial clients. It's the reason they will continue to do well. It's a question of how much alpha can they generate, and then the more that is proven, the more they will be sought out for being able to provide for. So, like, do you think that's like the right way of looking at the output of these platforms, or do you have a different read on it?
It's tough to say because there's like I was mentioning before, there's a lot of ifs, but the Palantir tries to focus as best as it can on the decision making process. Like they drill that down for every interview we've ever seen. They're always like, we're enabling decision making. Like, why do you think they do that? The thing is, again, their product is so mature already. Where why else would they go and get sign so many partnerships and all this stuff, right? Technically, their consumer side of it is actually still very nascent. It's not what we're talking, maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 years, right? In the SaaS world, that's like not that much. Usually, how the play works is, if you're a company that has transitioned from another line of business, you're going to have one whale. Like you want to go after one big whale and just sort of milk them a little bit. Use R&D, use that for R&D money, and then start fishing, right? But now Palantir is basically like, let's take a broader approach. And the reason they're doing that is because it's a larger game plan, in my opinion. And the faster these guys can actually perform the actions that these platforms are suggesting to them. And you got to remember, it's a two-way street, right? So as they're declining the options or actions, or as they're choosing a different sort of suggested result, the Palantir themselves are learning, right? The Foundry itself is sort of like, okay, why was this decision taken rather than this one? So I don't know. I think it's tough to look at it, but I'm going to go back on that ecosystem side of it because I think that's where really the money is.
Yeah.
And right now I don't think it's there yet. I think they have products that are capable of that, but now they just have to scale like crazy. And I think that's what they're doing with all these partnerships. And Foundry for Builders is a perfect example of this. Imagine if, let's say they invest, what did they invest in, like 14 SPACs or something, right?
Yeah, it might be more than that at this point,
Okay.
but around
So
there, yeah.
yeah, so let's say like 30% of those become somewhat big companies, right? That's 30% of stuff you didn't have, and you barely had to invest anything to get it, right? All of a sudden your scale goes up like this, and it's almost like an A/B test for your own product.
Yeah, so I would say on that, I think 30% is probably too high with these sort of highly kind of speculative at this point
Fair enough. Yep.
assets. But yeah, I think that is the game they're trying to play, which is if any of these are good, even at 1 out of 15, right?
Yeah.
1 out of 15 becomes $100 billion company, or billion, or actually some of them are already in the billions, but
never know.
tens of billions. Yeah. I think that's why they're doing this. They surely don't believe all of them will be successful, but
yeah,
I think it's more so for the product development, as you're saying.
Yeah.
And
honestly, another thing, sorry to interject, but another thing too is we got to remember, like each company that they partner with or whoever, even if it's a big, small company, whatever, right? Their data is not like, it's not like an old school bank where, there's our vault, that is data. Like they have multiple different kinds of data sets, different categories, different teams that do different things with, so like where I work right now, we have, I think like at least seven or eight massive data lakes. Plus we have other data warehouses and all this other stuff. So like, if this company decided to work with Palantir, it's like, you're already getting another treasure trove of, information just from the varying data sets that one company has. So there's potential for product growth.
So you're saying in the ecosystem kind of argument that obviously these companies have to be connected somehow, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. I think Skywise is the best example of that at this point.
Yeah.
Have you seen kind of the beginnings of that for something else? Like, are we expecting this sort of thing to build out? How fast? I think maybe with Hyundai Heavy
Yeah.
Industries is the beginning of something like that, where it's more of a partnership, not just, I mean, I think they call them all partnerships, which they
Yeah.
are, but where they're actually trying to develop a platform for industrial companies. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, because the ecos, and I agree with you, because the ecosystems are so important for their future, do we see this happening more often?
I think. Oh, you mean from Palantir or from other companies?
Yeah, from Palantir.
Yeah, 100. They have to. This is if they don't do this, then they're just the same as Salesforce or anybody else. Like, well, what's the difference then, right? You're just selling SaaS.
Yeah,
So
so how do they make it happen then?
yeah, if you actually track the partnerships that they're doing, I think there's like it's kind of like a I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking out of my head here, but the larger picture here is actually kind of crazy, right? Because like with the whole Merck thing, Hyundai, like they're literally solving the way the entire world works. If you actually think, if you roll it back to a category perspective, right? Hyundai does their shipping, Merck does like a whole bunch of stuff, but it's, in this specific case, it's the supply chain for their semiconductor arm, right? Like we have problems with that right now, right? With the
Yeah,
whole supply
yeah,
chain issues. So in a way, it's more like this was a proving ground, I think. And Skywise is definitely like one of the first products to actually work for them. I think it clicked. They did it. Something clicked for them, and they're like, you know what? Why don't we do this for a larger sort of ecosystem altogether?
yeah,
Right. And I think it's just going to get bigger. And the big question here is who's going to be like who's actually going to say, okay, yeah, I'm down with this. Let's double down. Let's see what happens, right? Because the problem is, and this is another point I try to make a lot in my videos. The way people think about it right now from the enterprise side of it, they're very antiquated, honestly. Like
mm.
I've literally quit jobs because I just couldn't get anything done, and they're like, no, you have to do it this way, and it's like, dude, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah,
Like, what are you
yeah,
talking about, right? Like I've been in 4-hour meetings where we've ended up doing the same stuff we talked about in the first 5 minutes. It's like it's so stupid. So the way that the industry is it's not very innovative. It's not open to innovation just yet. Like just because it's tech doesn't mean it's super innovative all the time, right? And that's where the big question is. Who's willing to? It looks like Merck is like, you know what? Let's jump in. Hyundai is probably like, yeah, let's do it because they can see it. But who's going to follow now, right? Now the thing is, in this space, if you get a few people following, they'll all just cascade into it. That's how this thing works. Just because they're competing on like a razor edge, right? Like especially Hyundai, like that line of business is very very low margin, at least from the
yeah,
most recent stuff I read. So anybody's going to get a competitive edge, and if they say, okay, hey Palantir, like, why don't you just build us a product as well? And then Palantir can be like, no, we don't have to. This is actually like a full ecosystem. You can jump in if you want to. Who's going to say no to that?
yeah.
Right? Especially when right now the anything similar that you're getting is for your specific need, and you have to go through like a bunch of professional services and consulting to get more more white labeling done, right? So
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where Palantir shines, right? Because when you have all of this data being shared, it
yeah,
really comes down to the governance frameworks around that to make
yeah,
sure everything's okay. So, like the software defined data integration, and what's the other? There's like the purpose-based access control,
yeah,
or whatever they choose to call it. Because what I was just thinking about when you were talking is how much of an issue it would be if sort of data gets shared when it's not supposed to. And I know
mm,
they're already heavily focused on this, and I'm sure that's very much of what they've been working on so far, which not even just within the organization, but with other organizations along the way throughout the network and ecosystem.
so I think this point is it could be, to be honest, it could be a little bit on the nose, just because when you make these deals and you work with a data platform or something like this, right? You don't actually give them keys to your data. It's you
Mm,
do an abstraction of your own data. If they, like if you have a database on your side, you're actually having the software connect to it. You're not moving it usually, right?
okay.
Unless they're saying, okay, if they're like, okay, why don't you, for example, Snowflake does this, right? They're saying, okay, we have a data lake option, and why don't you come to us instead of using the AWS version or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Because AWS will just nickel and dime you for everything, but Snowflake will say, okay, we'll work with you on this, So people will move their data over to the Snowflake data lake. So that's an arbitrage people perform there. But with Palantir, they work with all of them. For them, they don't care about the actual data. It's more so like once it's in the system, how do they provide it? So I think the stuff they track, I don't know. I mean, you probably know more because you talked to some folks there. But from what I can tell, if from a technical perspective, how it's normally done in this situation is when you pull in like the sources, you're doing the inferences on it and providing some sort of result, right? The result that's picked and the decision that's made after this process is what's logged on the Palantir side. So that's how they build their products moving forward. They're like, oh, okay, so out of these different things, they picked this, why, and what was the angle there and that kind of stuff, right? So most likely you don't want that leaking, obviously, because then you can track the entire operational process of the company. But yeah.
Yeah, so do we want to bring this back? I know you said you wanted to kind of wrap it up on the B2C. So like you talked about the ecosystems, and it kind of sounds like you're not expecting a B2C product, but is Palantir from like a technical point of view, obviously able to make a B2C product? There's no reason why they couldn't, but I think Dave was saying it doesn't necessarily fit in with their mission, their focus as a company. But yeah, what do you think? Just a conclusion on that.
If Palantir wanted to float a B2C product, they could do it maybe in like a quarter. So it's okay
to appease the shareholders.
To
appease Wall Street.
Honestly, to be honest, like one of the big reasons I'm bullish as well, forget all the technicals, and I mean, you probably speak to that more than I do, right? But one of the biggest things is, like I was telling you this before, engineers can do a lot. If we really are given the reins to do what we need to and the time and all this stuff, right? We can do a lot. This is exactly why you see startups giving us like free food and stuff. It's not, that's why. But the problem is, very often, I've only worked at one place that does this, and it was the startup that got acquired, and after that, it went to shit. But basically, most companies try to push you down as an engineer. They don't want you to innovate too much or go too fast, because then they want to like store that lightning in a bottle kind of situation, right? And this is what causes the churn and the turnover half the time. It's a lot of frustration. And on top of that, like fan companies just load up on this, and it just becomes a pool. But if Palantir wanted to, they can do it, because they're from the culture video, and there's a few other videos they've put up. It just seems to me like, and that's why I tweeted saying like, if there's any Palantir employees, like let me know. I literally just want to talk like water cooler talk, right? Because a place that lets an engineer just kind of do it, like they most likely do this thing called CI/CD for continuous delivery, basically, which means that as a developer, if you're writing code, your code will hit production that day. Forget that day, it can hit production in the next 10 minutes. Right, so your result that you're looking for can be like viewed in real time almost. Right, this kind of stuff is a pipe dream for most other companies. Everyone thinks they do it, but if you really want to do it, there's a lot of checks and balances that you have to put in place. Now, given this process, I think Palantir can for sure foot a product. They can definitely push one out there, but why would they need to? I think if they focus on the ecosystem as a service thing first, then they can do this, maybe like a spin something off and do like that or whatever.
Yeah. So just my reasoning is for the B2C product is, I think Wall Street and kind of the valuation and sort of the investors look at Palantir's offering with Gotham and we're talking about Foundry right now, but they don't necessarily, they're not able to, I don't know. I just feel like they don't really see a big picture here. So
because they're looking at it. Sorry, Jackson. They're looking at it from the lens of a typical SaaS company, right? If you ask any engineer, right, if you go out a typical SaaS company, it's very narrow. It's very predictable. That's why, because they're like, oh, if you're just gonna do a sort of like a B2C product, then why don't you just go to small businesses right now? No, it's like if you look at it from that lens, of course, that's what they have to do. But if you look at it from the lens where they're completely reworking the fabric of SaaS and the fabric of enterprise software, that is quite literally an entire different workspace altogether, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't need a B2C at that point. You're literally running the world, right? So it's like,
No, I don't think they need a B2C. I think it would do wonders for the perception of the company. But
I got
that's a whole other thing.
Just because it's in the public space, like everyone knows about it kind of thing.
Yeah. Like obviously there would be, like as you're saying, the sort of household name type deal, but also it's a whole other like separate kind of revenue opportunity for Palantir, where because like I don't know, like, because they state their TAM, their total addressable market,
Yeah.
as like 55 billion for commercial and for government.
So let me run something by you. Let me know what you think, okay? And this is something that's been in my mind for a little while, but we kind of briefly discussed on it. But if they were to put one, I think the one issue that's there right now is the whole. So the cookie deprecation for advertisers is actually quite a big deal.
Okay.
They are working with like I think some of the leaked stuff and some other things that it was showing that they're working with banks and stuff, right? So
Yeah.
now a lot of the from the advertising space, and this is why I made that whole like Google. It's almost like Google in a sense
Yeah. Yeah.
because Google does this, right? They have all the first party data come in and they can basically help you make decisions and all this stuff. Programmatic advertising is what I'm talking about. Um, I think if they were to make a play, that would be the easiest one because it's a current problem, kind of like the supply chain issues.
Mm.
Apple decided to move their cookies and stuff, right? So a lot of companies have a ton of data, like within their own databases for first party, and this could actually throw like a grenade into everything too, because this is literally people's data, right? It's
Yeah.
like people's like browsing data, people's banking data that they can't see your accounts, of course. It's more so just like session data, right? And that's a misconception. It's not like they know who you are. It's just they know what you're doing more for the
Yeah.
most part,
Yeah.
right? But if they were to address that, there's like a lot of stuff you can do there because now there's actually like all these agencies are basically trying to spin some sort of product on their own because they're going to lose like a ton of money there. It could be that, you never know, but they're working. Some of their clients that they're working with are in that space already. So maybe it's up to their clients to say, "Hey, Palantir, we have this one issue with the first party data. Why don't you see if you can help us out?" Kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Could be.
totally. So I wanted to ask you about this, which is we saw Palantir last year
Yeah.
do their demo day, which corresponded with their new model year, not really model, but new software for the year for 2021, which was their demo day for
Okay.
Foundry, Gotham, and Apollo. So what I wanted to ask you is because I was reading some stuff a while back on sort of Apple and Siri and how Siri really struggled, not just because of Apple wanted to sort of stay strong on the privacy side of things, but
Yeah.
the original team, I think, wanted to push updates once a year, like new features and stuff
Okay.
once a year at their developer conference for the new iOS version or whatever. And like obviously that's not the case for Google or the Amazon devices that I don't want to say the name of. But my question to you is Apollo is constantly updating the Foundry and Gotham operating systems, but I'm sort of expecting a Palantir 22 launch, as they will call it,
Yeah.
early this year, as they did last year. So I'm wondering, what do you think about doing sort of new year launches for the software versus when a feature or functionality becomes available, just adding it right in as Tesla does, for instance, or
Okay.
like not like bug or like tiny fixes, but for
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
sort of
Major
bigger
changes.
stuff. Yeah, like what are your thoughts on that?
So you're saying what are my thoughts on pushing major changes whenever they occur?
Yeah, so like major like I forget exactly what they were talking about
Yeah.
with the 22 launch because it corresponded with demo day, which was kind of the first actual
Right.
presentation. So I didn't know how much was actually new versus existing before. But
Right. Right.
assuming they do a new launch every year, which is basically just a rebrand of the software announcing what's new for their platforms, assuming they do that, do you sort of agree with that, or do you think it's better for for like the clients to be constantly getting the updates over time, or do you think kind of just perfecting the updates and waiting for them to be ready and just launching once a
Yeah.
year in Q1? Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, is
No,
this just a
I
bad
think I get you.
question?
Yeah. No. No. For sure. It does matter in the sense that okay. So what they're doing with this right now is already a little bit better because most of the again just to touch on the competition part, most of the competitors have they just change the UI. Honestly,
Mm,
half the time they
yeah.
just like move buttons around and they're like, "Look, we got an update," right? So that in itself is good. But I'm of the belief that whenever you have an update, you push it. It's actually not that difficult. The problem is when you actually go ahead and do that, you have dependency issues. So especially with a company like Palantir, when they address multiple different companies, if you push an update, and again, it's supposed to be agnostic, right, what you're doing, but if the update somehow starts to, like, of course there's tests and stuff along the way, but there's very often cases, especially when you're dealing with multiple clients using similar or the same thing, that you're going to have weird edge cases. So I think in this particular step, most technical staff do what's called like a gold candidate, and they'll do a whole crap ton of testing. It's always available to push whenever you want it to. The pipeline is actually quite the same. But once you push it, you store it in some sort of artifact registry, and then you piece together a bunch of updates, right? And that's what actually creates the major updates. So as you start coding, you're like, oh, this one is definitely a big one. So everything that comes after this, let's package it as one major update, because we don't know how it's gonna, react for the most part.
Okay.
Personally, though, I think this is on the tech side of it. People do this out of mainly security. Like, it's easier to get an update right rather than have it fail and then do a rollback policy. Because then how are you going to tell your if you're providing an ecosystem as a service, you can't tell your ecosystem, all right guys, just that last thing I did, my bad, right? So I think right now it's like that, but in my experience, most companies have actually moved away from this a little bit, just because the general efficiencies of code pipelines are a little bit better nowadays. So you can effectively test and deploy as you need to. I think Palantir will do that as well, but they're at that stage where they're still experimenting with this whole ecosystem thing and how companies are going to react to it. So I think eventually they will do that, to be honest, because I think it's you're right. Like, I'm with you on that, where if you have an update, in my opinion, I think you should probably push it and sort of go from there.
Yeah. I think part of it's like marketing too. It's like nice that they have this new list of features to announce.
But you can do like a technical doc. I mean, honestly, Palantir is a pretty technical company. All the comments I get is all like, "Oh, all your stuff is great, but I don't understand anything from their website." Right? So if you're going to be technical, then just go fully be technical, man. Like, release a design doc, or release a requirement, like a doc that says, in the past 6 months, in the past 2 quarters, these are the features that were set out to, and these are the dates. This is actually tracked already. So when you do a deploy process within like your workplace, internally, you do this internally already. So, and then there's an entire team of business staff that sit and read through this and say, okay, this is a major one. We're going to reword this so that it sounds better to non-technical. So this happens a lot. So they can just release that.
Gotcha there. Yeah, makes sense. I was just wondering about that. So how much more time do you have here?
I got time, man.
Because, well, we've been already going for an hour, but I'm just kind of like rapid fire on a few more things here.
No worries.
We were going to talk about stock-based compensation. I think it's people are kind of annoyed hearing about it by now, but kind of, you said you have obviously your industry perspective here. So just kind of, what do you have to share that someone might not already know?
Yeah, no worries. I think most of the stuff people already know. I've been here nor there on this, just because I don't fully understand some of the dilution part of it. So I'll rely on some of the finance people to talk about that with the whole float and all this stuff, right? But to be honest, people have to understand one thing. Like, if you're talking from a developer perspective, like I always say, is your salary ends up getting you the job, but the things that come after it ends up making you stay, right? So with stock-based comp, I actually don't mind it being where it's at as it currently stands, because if they're in growth mode, they need to hire engineers. And honestly, FANG, all these big tech, is a massive sink. They will literally hire people just because they can. So I know folks who work at Google and Microsoft that literally don't do anything for weeks on end. And these guys are good engineers. They're not, that's how they get in, right? But they don't do anything. They're like, whatever, man, the pay's good, So if how are you going to compete against that, right? How are you going to compete against the Google clout and people want to work at Microsoft, Amazon? You can't. You have to offer something a little bit better. On top of that, some people have some kind of, they feel some kind of way about Palantir, right? So you have to offer something. So for you to compete with the best pool of engineers, I can already tell you, that's what they want. That's 100% what they want. It's not about the money itself. It's about what else can you get? Because if you're really that good, you can get, if you want just the money, you can get that from any shop.
Yeah.
But from an executive perspective, I still got to do some digging on that. So
I think what I was hearing, and I didn't know this, but I think I heard it from Tom Nash,
Yeah.
both on Twitter and in his video, is that the way Palantir set it up is you see all this dilution right away at the offering
Yeah.
because they have it baked in and set up for whatever period of time. But the float is the shares on the market that are able to be exchanged and sold.
Right. Yeah, I heard that too.
Yeah. So basically, I think Palantir was kind of forward thinking on that, where stock-based compensation is occurring for
Yeah.
like as compensation, but the shares aren't getting issued now. They were already recognized,
Yeah, I
which
think
is
the
fine,
argument.
but same effect sort of
No,
deal.
that's fair. That's fair. But I think like some folks, and I'm trying to stay, we have to try and stay objective. This is like a, investment at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
But I think some of the arguments I've heard is like, how much of that, even if it was planned, like, is it, I don't know, somewhat malicious or whatever? I don't think so. But I can see how people think of it like that, where they're like, yes, it direct listed, but like a whole bunch of us now literally holding the bag as people cash out. I get that. Like, I get why people think like that, but I don't know. I don't know. My thoughts on that side, I don't have, and I don't want to foot it just because I want to do some more research on my end. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how I stand with it now. I think they've done it to like a certain extent where
Yeah.
it's kind of too much, I think, but it's really how like if the company financially does well into the future,
Yeah.
everyone's going to be fine with it. But at this point,
Yeah.
I think it's like a little too much. So like even like I'm fine saying it's too much. Like it's a totally valid criticism, but it's their strategy, it's their plan.
Yeah, man.
So like you just kind of have to live with it as a shareholder, or just choose not to be a shareholder
Yeah.
currently and wait and see how it plays out.
Yeah, like I think 2022 is going to be a big year for this. It's we're going to see what's happening. To be like, from a technical angle, their product maturity is the best I've seen for any product that's competing right now. Just and it's not because other companies aren't good. It's just that because they're purposely not doing it so they can make more money off you after, right? So
Yeah.
just from that angle, like, let's see what 2022 brings. I mean, if they continue doing this stuff, I think maybe there's going to be some pitchforks and torches.
Yeah. 2022 will definitely be a very exciting year for Palantir either way. I think we should see some really good performance.
Yeah.
With because like kind of their margins have kind of stabilized and stagnated, I guess you could say, which is interesting, right? For the growth they're having, that their operating expenses are increasing.
Yeah.
But it's to be expected. But yeah, it's stock-based compensation. It's their increasing sales team. So let's see, what is that investment going to do? Can like something come out of it?
Yeah.
But that is probably a discussion for something else. So I wanted to talk to you about this, which is Chris Patel. I don't know if he's still in the chat, but he was talking to me a few months back about Palantir Gotham and Palantir Foundry as two separate entities and potentially splitting them off. Now, my point of view is that if Palantir felt like they needed to do this for some reason, they would have already done it, especially ahead of a direct listing.
Yeah.
So I don't think 1 year into a direct listing, they would all of a sudden make this change. So I don't expect it to happen, but I do see it as beneficial for a few reasons that have become evident. The first of which is kind of the media coverage of Palantir. I think the Gotham, like as great as it is as a piece of software, really attracts just too much negative media coverage, too much confusion in the way of just everyday people. So I definitely see how it would be beneficial to sort of split that off, separate people's thinking about the company. But what I wanted to ask you is first your thoughts on that, but then also, do you think they're just from like a organization perspective, like obviously there are engineers probably working on both that could go either way, but also this was something I was wondering, which you probably don't have an answer to, but I was wondering if like there's like a shared code base at all there, and if that is a benefit.
Well, yeah, of course, like none of us would know that, but from a technical perspective, this is not a technical problem. This is a business and a PR problem.
Yeah.
So most of the time, actually, when you in any industry, so Palantir builds everything in-house and from scratch, and that's why they're able to sort of generate stuff fast, and they want to retain engineers and stuff, right? That's a very typical sign. When you do that stuff, you over all of your different products that you potentially provide, the variations are just on the front end, or the variations are just on like basically the middle tier in front end. There's a lot of code sharing is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So even if like it's not going to literally use the same code base, that's I can almost put my entire name on like that, saying that it's not the same code base, but there
I
is
understand.
for sure code sharing, which means some business logic for Gotham is in Foundry, right? In some variation or the other. Just because that's how you turn out product fast, right? Like you not literally copy and paste, but you take the logic and then you tweak it to say, okay, based on this other model that we're using specifically for Foundry, performing this action. But the actual input output and how the business logic actually works is actually very similar and most likely shared. So it's
Okay.
the technical side of it is a non-starter here. Like if they really wanted to, from a code perspective, you can do it overnight, and it's just a PR and sales problem.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I think that's interesting. How it is more of just obviously a business sort of perspective and how they want to portray themselves. And I think that's kind of what they've been struggling with on the marketing side. I saw someone say, okay, Daniel Stocks was saying, like, is the sales team engineers? And originally they didn't have a sales team because they were just engineers. I think Karp was the salesperson, and he was getting these contracts done. But now they're starting to build out a sales team, starting to go heavier on marketing. I think all of these people, they have to get non-engineers into the company to start doing these sorts of things. Like, engineers are great. They're building the product. They're the reason the company is what it is today. But I think they've started to realize, as a public company, one that needs to answer to shareholders, that they need to do these other things that they weren't already doing. And I think they've already been sort of making this transition. And
honestly, this whole sales thing is like, in any good, and here's the problem here, right? Like, for those of you guys who don't understand, good tech doesn't always win, right? So that's the problem here. So people always think, oh yeah, like the best companies are the most innovative. They might be, but they're most likely, it's not just the tech, right? Because us tech guys, most of the time, like, we can't talk, and we just kind of want to sit in our computers and do our thing, right? And we love that. That's our thing. But you need guys like sales and marketing. You need them. That's the three-headed beast of any SaaS company: is sales, marketing, and engineers, like the product folks, like tech. If you don't have a good, at least two of these three things, you're dead in the water, or you're just sort of bleeding, right? So yeah, like, I mean, the text, that's why for me, I'm looking for this too, right? And the thing is, again, like, the product maturity is high. That I keep trying to drill that point in, right? They have a full-fledged product that does very, very, like, high impact stuff already. So really, it's over the board. It's over the the wall now. They already tossed it over to the sales and marketing side. They're like, all right, now you do it. It's your turn, right? So that's why it's not like that. Usually, companies foot products that are, or they'll front products that are like kind of half-ass half the time, or they do a very specific purpose for a company. Like, they'll say, oh yeah, we worked with this bank and we did everything for them, but then you guys, just talk to us, book a meeting, and we'll talk about it, right? Because it's not a full-fledged product, but the sales and marketing guys will start churning, and it's almost like you're selling futures a little bit, right? And then that's when you get your professional services side of it, or the consulting side of it, that sits there and says, oh, hey guys, let's do all this stuff. So I mean, product maturity is there. I think they just need to sell and market it well.
Yeah. So we were talking about earlier, before this started, the whole pricing argument. Is Palantir charging as much as they could charge? And from what I've heard anecdotally, is that their pricing is already kind of at the max of where they probably could be. I don't know how up to date that information is, if that's actually a widespread feeling, but it kind of goes back to what I was trying to get across to Dave here, which is, you take the company's existing data, allow them to take action upon it, and actually do something profitable for them, for the business. And then so like, the three things: it actually does something important. It makes a good change that is monetarily like
Yeah.
helpful and saves time. So like if they can do all three of those, that
Yeah.
is like you'll be willing to pay, right? So I don't know. So like, do you like it's sort of like a very subjective argument here for
Yeah.
the pricing side of things, but
It's
just
not really actually. It's
anything.
yeah, no, no, I get where you're going with this. It's not exactly, it's not totally, it's not fully subjective.
Mm,
See, the thing is, this is the sticker price isn't exactly what it seems, is what I'll tell you, right? Um, like Salesforce is notorious for this, right? Great product, good company, all this stuff, right? But when you talk to the Salesforce guys, they're always like, let's book the next meeting, we'll talk later, kind of thing, right? At least from my experience, right? The thing is, the immediate price that you get is most likely, in my experience at least, 90% of the time, not the end of what you're paying. So, and yeah, and basically, like, from the sales guys I've spoken to, it's like, oh, if they can afford $100,000 contract now, then they definitely have another 50 lying around. So we'll throw professional services their way, right? Or
yeah,
sorry, consulting. We'll throw consulting their
consulting.
way, right? So, and dude, that's what I do. That's literally what I do. I'm on that consulting side. That's like, all right, let me come do the stuff I've already could have done for you for the same price, but here we go. I'll
Yeah,
charge you hourly.
it seems like Palantir, like not only are they not a consulting company, but it seems like they're like anti-consulting in a sense.
They can't be, because the reason is, again, if they are, then what they're basically saying is their product isn't complete. It's not fully feature complete. Their whole model is trying to be agnostic to as many businesses as possible, right?
Yeah.
They're saying, you come over to us, you bring your data, we will help you provide, or help you save your time and increase efficiencies by giving you, like, informed decision making, based on
Mhm.
modeling and all this stuff, right? That's, it's, you can't say, oh, come to us, we'll help you make decisions, but first you have to sit with our consulting side, and they'll have to write like a few extra lines of code for you. Then where are we then, right? Their onboarding sucks, because the whole value prop here is that you save so much time onboarding Palantir that the sticker price might be higher than another competitor, but you're not paying much more after that. Most likely they do have some sort of consulting after, because not, there's going to be edge cases where you have to code for, right?
Yeah.
But what happens then is you can do that, and you can sort of, it's more predictable for a company. And half the time, this is the thing that a lot of people are missing. Half the time, these companies, when they prospect, they have like maybe 6 or 7 products that they want to onboard, right? Once they go through all of these processes, it costs so much time and money, right? Like, I mean, I'm not cheap, and the sales guys are definitely not cheap, right? Like the ones that are selling to us, the people that are prospecting, the project managers, the product managers, they're not cheap. So after 4 months of prospecting, paying all our salaries, once these guys come in, even if they hit a little bit of more of what you need, they'll be like, okay, you know what, go with it. Let's just get something done at this point, because it's just taking too long. So there's that. It weighs on the company's head, because then the operating costs just go up like crazy. You're just sitting there wasting money, right? Whereas Palantir is like, most of the time we'll address that in 6 weeks, and if you need anything further, then it's the same process as anywhere else. So
Yeah.
if you're paying a higher sticker price for that, then I feel like it's worth it. That's why I'm saying increase it. Let the professional services do its thing. But
Yeah, and there's something to be said about just having that high price. It is like a psychological thing, which
yeah,
is like we're going to be getting so much value from this if they're
you
able
know,
to get away with it. So, and also the other thing about the pricing is like the contract, like just for when they sign a contract, I think that's really just the beginning about their relationship with
yeah,
the customer. So like obviously it's going to get a lot larger. We've seen the retention numbers that they share years on end so far, and
it's
the
sticky.
contracts just get bigger
Yeah,
as they
it's sticky
go.
for sure.
Yeah, stickiness is huge. I just wanted to ask you one last thing, which is future products. Chris was kept leaving comments. Some other people were interested. I've been sort of reading the comments along the way. Future products. So we talked B2C for a while here, but aside from, and this is the main thing, continuing to develop out their existing products, I
Yeah,
imagine future products that could be in the pipeline are just sort of like new modules, right? Or
yeah,
new iterations of Foundry and Gotham. Is that what
yeah.
you're thinking?
I feel like maybe it's they. I think Skywise did something for them, or they're like, holy shit, this works. It was almost
Mm,
like a light bulb moment. So now they
yeah.
did the Athenia thing. Personally, I think a big one they might be, I don't know, I hope they do it, but it might address banking actually. So like the whole like banking and financial sector, because it's a mess, man. Like I've had contracts and I've worked with some of the stuff there, and it's literally like years to just do a small menial task. And it can, and there's a lot of regulation there, for the data sets and stuff like that. But for the most part, I think they can do something where it's almost like an ecosystem for the banking space, to
Okay.
draw insights and stuff for that. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I still think healthcare is a play, but I know, Chris, you said that maybe that's not a thing, but we'll discuss it.
Yeah, no, I definitely think healthcare is huge. I think that could be sort of a vertical, I guess not B2C, which is like too far out at this point, or
Yeah,
not even
B2C.
something they've
Yeah,
said they're doing. But I think healthcare as like obviously something, well, all these industries have so much data
yeah.
that they need to get insights from. But I think, yeah, I think healthcare is definitely huge.
Like I'm thinking
Um,
from a velocity perspective. Like, what do you do on a daily basis, right? We
yeah.
check our like banking apps and all this stuff. Like the amount of interactions that people take a lot is more, like transactions and that kind of stuff, right? So that's why I was saying banking, but healthcare as well is huge.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, this has been great, Shabari, talking with you. This was amazing. Great conversation. Got the technical side of things, some recent on Palantir in the market today, and yeah, anything else you wanted to say?
No, just that, we're all hurting, man. I mean, people,
Seriously.
we're all hurting. Stock price sucks, but just do your own research, guys. At the end of the day, I mean, Jackson and I can only provide so much, and a lot of it's speculation. But we try our best to do what we can. So I would really highly suggest people look into it. Try to understand the actual value of what they provide. Just go back to the founders and see what they're actually wanting to do with this product.
Right.
If that resonates with what you want to do, then feel free to put your investment there. If not, then find something else, whatever works for you guys. So
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's not an all or nothing like Monday when the market opens
yeah,
at January 10th. It's going to be. I think from a financial perspective, which is what Wall Street cares about, and the stock price is going to follow that.
yeah.
I think we're going to really need to. This is what I've been thinking about: is the growth and the sort of the margins
Or like
in
profitability.
the profitability. But
Jackson, what's
yeah, I
what's your
definitely
what's your thoughts on that? What's your gripe on that? Like, do you have an issue with that or no?
profitability
Yeah, yeah,
today. Like, no, I have no issue with it.
yeah,
I do think like everyone always brings up how like they're 18 years old and have no profitability.
yeah.
I think
No,
it's
this is a
it's
totally different. Like, people don't
clear as
understand
day.
what they're doing. The initiative right now that's happening with the whole the consumer side of it, or the commercial side of it, is a totally different ballgame, right? You got to think of it as a completely different line of business, which actually it is a completely different line of business.
Yeah,
They're using some code from Gotham, but like, I mean, come on, right? It's not
yeah,
it's not the same. And at this point, I think, actually, I know we're running out of time here, but I used to work in R&D for a few years, and this was an actual pressure point for that. That's, remember the company I was telling you that acquired the other one because they were making an
yeah,
app better.
yeah,
So I was on the R&D side that was doing this version of the app or whatever, right? And the thing is, this was a huge pressure. Like, we were, from the even the engineers were like, what the hell? Like, who's concerned about quarterly profits? We're actually making progress, right? So what they did was, by doing this acquisition, they actually destroyed their entire R&D, and right now they're fully stagnant. Like, you shouldn't
hmm
worry that much. Palantir is at a stage where they're fully building working ecosystems. Like, look at Skywise,
yeah,
right? If
yeah,
if the stuff that they're doing is working, then profitability should matter, because they should go back into R&D, and they should churn out more as much as they can with the current model, right? If the stuff they're doing isn't working, then that's a problem. Maybe take
yeah.
some profits and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's going to come to a point where it's going to turn into profitability, even if they're not trying for it.
Yeah, man, it's
It's
it's SaaS. Like, if they want it to really be profitable, they can just flip a switch.
yeah.
It's
I
high
think
margin. It's just software.
Yeah, I think it's coming. They don't want to say like exactly when,
Yeah,
give like outlook on it, but it's obviously coming. It's just what's dragging them down. Like they would be nearly
yeah,
profitable if it weren't for the stock-based compensation.
yeah,
But I think, yeah, it's coming. I'm not worried about the profitability. What I want to just see is the growth continuing and
yeah,
accelerating. They talked about accelerating growth in their Investor Day presentation, and I'm not sure we've really seen that, at least in this last quarter. which is, I mean, it's the reason Palantir was and still kind of is highly valued in the market, which is that high growth rate and just their agility and their ability to serve these companies that need the most and sort of expand their.
I know. Yeah.
I don't know, because they're at like a couple hundred companies out of their target 6,000.
Yeah.
So you move any closer to that and they'll hit profitability. So whether it's next year or if it is this year, I don't know. I'm not really looking at it. Maybe I will, but it'll be coming.
Yeah. If you guys, whoever's watching, if you guys are working in some kind of tech company, right, go talk to your salespeople. Like they'll tell you straight up, if there is some competitive edge to be had, they will take it. Like, people jump into products that they don't even care about just because their competitors jump into it. So the fact of the matter is, as long as Palantir can provide actual value, and Airbus is a huge example of this, right? They, with Skywise, they're like, holy crap, this works, and even their efficiency is increased. So most likely, it'll ramp. We're at 100 now, but when it gets to that sort of like 20% mark of that final goal, you'll get a whole bunch of companies that just sign up just because it's sticky and it's competitive.
Yeah, I'm not worried about profitability, like that it hasn't happened yet, just because Palantir is a certain age. I'm not worried about that at all. Palantir. Wait, there was a funny comment. Oh yeah, Palantir has not been profitable since 1923. Yeah, that's the reason the stock's down. I'll tell you. Well, Cyberfam, thank you so much for joining me. Plug your channel and your Twitter, whatever. Because it's been really great to get your insights on the technical side, and I'm definitely a subscriber. Here to watch more of your videos.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I'm a huge fan. My Twitter is just OG Cyberfam. So yeah. And then my channel is just Cyberfam on YouTube. So feel free to check out my content. And guys, like we're all learning this stuff together. So the one thing I always ask is just interact. Like if you feel like you have something to say, just let me know in the comments or tweet at me or something. So we'll have a discussion.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I think we covered a lot. And yeah, guys, seriously, go over to his channel. Let's because you had just passed 1,000 subscribers, right? That's a huge milestone.
Like 3 months ago, I was just like sitting on a couch, like I should do something.
Well, you've done it. You've done it. Seriously, that's huge.
Really appreciate your time, Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. We'll see where things go from here, but I am definitely optimistic.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for the time. Thank you, everyone watching.